AUGUSTA, the Maine House voted Monday to sustain Governor Paul LePage's veto of a bill that would create the legal framework for retail sales of recreational marijuana. The bill was the result of more than 9 months of work by a special committee tasked with implementing the law that voters narrowly approved last November, putting Maine among the 8 states in the District of Columbia that had legalized the adult use of marijuana. The 74-62 vote Monday fell 17 votes short of the 2/3 margin required to overturn LePage's veto. In his veto letter, Governor Paul LePage dismissed the marijuana regulatory bill essentially as a risky, inconsistent and expensive rush job. In his veto letter, Governor Paul LePage dismissed the marijuana regulatory bill essentially as a risky, inconsistent and expensive rush job. Staff photo by Derek Davis. Related headlines. LePage just says no to bill that would launch Maine's marijuana market. Want news about Maine's marijuana industry? Subscribe to the Maine Cannabis Report. Photo store. Search photos available for purchase. Photo store. The path forward for the ballot box law remains unclear, with the current moratorium on recreational sales expiring February 1. The legislature reconvenes in January and could pass legislation then, but it's uncertain whether the political dynamic will change enough in the next 2 months for an implementation law to be passed or the moratorium to be extended. If neither occurs, the ballot box law would take effect, a prospect that some lawmakers find alarming. "I feel like we legalized gasoline, but not gas stations," said Representative Martin Groman, a Bedford Independent. Senator Roger Katz, our Augusta co-chairman of the special legislative committee that wrote the implementation bill, is unsure what the next steps will be. 74-62 is a good victory in a basketball game, but it's not enough to overcome a veto," Katz said after the House vote. "We will regroup, and we will sit around and try to figure out where the heck we go from here, and I hope somebody has some bright ideas, because right now I don't have any." Advertisement. Katz said the bill is passed by the 17-member Special Committee on Marijuana Implementation, which remains an active committee, was crafted with the state's voters in mind. "We recognize that almost half the people of the state of Maine voted against this," Katz said. "So at every turn we made a conscious effort to keep this bill as conservative as possible." Among its provisions, the bill required those licensed to sell recreational marijuana to be Maine residents and mandated that companies set up to produce commercial marijuana have majority Maine ownership, prohibited sales via the internet or at drive-through windows, and set up a tax structure that included money to increase the number of drug recognition officers in Maine law enforcement, an effort meant to prevent and prosecute illegal impaired driving. "By failing to pass legislation, we are driving people to the illegal dealer on the street corner," Katz said. Although Maine was among the first states to pass a medical marijuana law, the drug remains illegal at the federal level, a key reason that LePage cited in vetoing the recreational regulation measure, which passed the legislature in October with bipartisan support. In his veto letter, LePage also said the bill sets unrealistic timelines for launching the market, fails to address shortcomings in the medical marijuana program, creates a confusing regulatory system, and might not generate enough tax revenue to cover the cost of market implementation or regulation. In short, he dismissed the bill as a risky, inconsistent, expensive rush job. Advertisement. While campaigning for re-election in 2014, LePage said that, if voters approved legal marijuana he would support that decision. But he backed away from that in his veto letter, writing, "Until I clearly understand how the federal government intends to treat states that seek to legalize marijuana, I cannot in good conscience support any scheme in state law to implement expansion of legal marijuana in Maine." Moratorium extension fails. In a floor speech Monday, House Minority Leader Ken Fredette, R. Newport, a key LePage ally in the legislature, said that regardless of the outcome of the override vote, it was unlikely that retail sales of recreational marijuana would have begun before the moratorium expires Feb. 1. He called on lawmakers to extend the moratorium to provide time for the administration to do the rulemaking that establishes details of retail licensing and a tax regime. Fredette suggested that the legislature try to move on that extension Monday, but Democratic leadership rejected that proposal, deciding to allow the issue to wait until January. This vote today to sustain this veto is really a vote to have us maybe even work informally over the next 60 days, but really to come back in 60 days and have it positioned in here where those issues can be addressed in a timely fashion and a fairly short fashion, and we can pass something that we can have a consensus on this really important issue, Fredette said. He also said one important issue for his caucus was extending the moratorium. There is no way rulemaking is going to be done in time for a February 1 date, he said. Advertisement. But those backing the legalization bill are concerned that the lack of action is creating conditions that will allow the illegal market to take root and expand. I think if we don't act and move, we are going to continue to create profits and incentives for the wrong people, said Groman, the Bidford Independent. The kind of profits and incentives that we very much do not want to create in these times. Senator Mark Dion, D. Portland, a former Cumberland County sheriff and 2018 gubernatorial candidate, also was among those backing the legalization bill. The governor's veto is the latest in a long line of setbacks, but we remain closer than ever before to enacting reasonable drug policy reforms to end the system of black market profits and needless incarceration, Dion said. We will continue to do our work, knowing the people of Maine are on our side. It's only a matter of time before the voters' will is fulfilled. Investors may go elsewhere. Current law makes it legal for adults to use and possess up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana or grow up to 6 plants of their own, but does not allow commercial production of marijuana retail sales. It also repeals previous state law that prevented marijuana from being given away or used as a promotional item.